Using our 19mm socket, we're going to go ahead and remove our lug nuts. Grab your wheel, remove it, set it aside. We're going to use a 14mm gear wrench to go ahead and loosen our lower sway bar end link nut. We're using locking pliers here to grab the inside of the pivot shaft here. We're going to put our wrench back on the outside here. And we're going to go ahead and try and loosen this. We use our 17mm socket and ratchet on this side here. I'm going to use a 17mm wrench on the other. Let's go ahead and loosen and remove this nut. Now we're going to go ahead and tap the end of this bolt here. I'm going to go ahead and spin that bolt out. On our lower ball joint here, we're going to use our pliers. I'm going to open up this cotter pin here. You want to grab the head of it here if you can. I'm going to try and pull this cotter pin out. Now in this case here, I can't get the head of the cotter pin with my cutting pliers. So I'm going to use a small pick just to get in and see if I can tap this in. Just enough so I can pull the head of that and try and get my pliers on here. And I'm going to grab it and use some leverage, and we can go ahead and work that cotter pin out like that. Going to use our 19mm socket on this little ball joint nut and our breaker bar. Let's go ahead and loosen this nut. And what we're going to do is we're going to leave the nut attached here. Probably half the threads from the ball joint are in this here, but you can see the gap. That's what we want right now. And what we're going to do here is we're going to apply a little bit of pressure using our screw jack on our brake rotor and hub assembly just to apply some pressure upwards so we can go ahead and try and separate the knuckle from our lower control arm. There should be little to no resistance because the strut is no longer applying downward pressure, so it should be pretty easy to raise this up. If you don't have a screw jack, you can always go ahead and use your regular jack with a block of wood as a spacer on the rotor so you don't damage your brake backing plate here. I'm going to go ahead and use our hammer, and we're going to strike the lower control arm right here to go ahead and separate the knuckle ball joint from the control arm. Be sure you're wearing safety glasses when you're doing something like this. So we're going to use a pry bar here. You can see that our ball joint is separated. Go ahead and remove your jack. Set that aside for now. I'm going to use my impact here to try and spin this nut. We have that now separated. Go ahead and use our pry bar just to make sure that's still loose. And it is. Now on our forward bolt here for our lower control, and this is a 19mm. I'm going to use our breaker bar. Let's go ahead and loosen this. Now the nut on the top is a fixed nut, so we don't have to worry about that spinning. That is free. Let's go ahead and switch over to our impact and see if we can spin that bolt out. We're going to work this bolt in and out a little bit. It is a little bit rusty on the top. Applying some rust penetrant to the top threads should help. On the rear portion of our control arm, we have a 17mm bolt here. So we're going to go ahead and use our socket and our ratchet to go ahead and loosen this. Now that it's loose, we're just going to go ahead and spin this out all the way and remove that bolt. Now at this point here, we have all of the bolts out. We want to go ahead and get ready to separate a lower control arm. Go ahead and put your jack back underneath the brake rotor here. Lift this up. Now at this point here, I want to go ahead and separate the rest of our components, like our strut that is now loose. We're going to put our pry bar between the subframe and the control arm, and we're just going to slowly work these bushings out. You want to be careful when this pops out. It has a little bit of weight behind it. I'm going to go ahead and raise our jack a little bit more so we can get a little bit more room in here to get our control arm. Let's go ahead and feed the front portion in first. And use our mallet here. So once we have this front bushing popped in there, we can go ahead and work on the back section of the control arm. Should be able to go ahead and twist this up into place. And pop this in. So I want to go ahead and use our large punch right now, and we're going to basically just put it up inside, and we're going to put it inside the metal sleeve here and line up the control arm bushing. Let's go ahead and try putting our bolt up. Try and get the threads caught on this. It's going to work the mallet on the control arm. Try and get this lined up a little bit better. Now once we get the threads caught, I'm going to go ahead and get this bolt in a few threads. Let's go ahead and run this in a few threads. I'm not going to make it tight. We just want to have a little bit of a gap there so we still have mobility of the control arm. I'm going to go ahead and start to lower this down into place. Pop that in, and let's go ahead and remove our jack. Now at this point here, I want to go ahead and get our bolt lined up with the control arm. I'm going to use a small pry bar. Go ahead and get that pried on up here. Let's go ahead and get that started here. Now if that doesn't want to line up right away, we can now use our mallet in conjunction with our pry bar to get everything to line up just right. Once we get this started a few threads, we can go ahead and run that down a little bit. So the bolt in almost all the way, just a little bit loose. Let's go ahead and get our lower ball joint attached. Let's go ahead and get our ball joint nut started on here. I'm going to go ahead and torque this down to 60 foot-pounds. Next thing we want to do is make sure that the hole in our lower ball joint shaft here lines up with a notch in our castle nut. That way there we can go ahead and reinstall a new cotter pin. And ours is a little bit overlapping here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and tighten this up a little bit more so that our next notch in our castle nut lines up with that hole. You never want to loosen this in order to get that placement in there. So just go ahead and tighten this down more. Just a hair bit more for that to line up. There we go. Once that comes through, we can go ahead and take our pliers. Going to bend over our lower tab here. I'm going to cut off the excess. Now what we want to do is go ahead and get our strut fork here lined up with our control arm. You can clearly see that the lower control arm is not going to line up with this here. So we're going to go ahead and get our jack. I'm going to put it underneath the control arm here. We're going to raise this up and then install our bolt. Let's go ahead and raise up our control arm. Install our bolt. So the bolt is hitting the back side of our fork here. So we're just going to go ahead and position this using our pry bar to line that up. We're going to go ahead and tap the bolt on the other side. And let's go ahead and get that nut installed on that. Let's go ahead and snug this down. All right, before we tighten this down, we want to go ahead and use our jack. We're going to raise up our suspension. What we're going to do is we're going to raise this up until the vehicle just starts to come off of the lift, off of our stand. When we do our final torque on this here, we want the vehicle to be at its regular ride height. We don't want to torque everything in a full droop position because that can cause premature wear on our suspension bushings. Now the suspension in its neutral riding position, again, snug that down. Let's go ahead and torque that down to 47 foot-pounds. Let's go ahead and snug these down now. I'm going to torque that to 65 foot-pounds. go ahead and torque down our rear bolt to 47 foot-pounds. We now go ahead and remove our jack from under the control arm. And remove our jack. Let's go ahead and install our end link here. And we did put a little bit of anti-seize compound on those threads there. Get that nut put on, and let's go ahead and snug that down. So we have to use our pliers here to hold the inside of this. I want to make sure this is good and tight. Let's go ahead and install our wheel. Let's get our lug nuts all started by hand, and we'll go ahead and get this snugged down. Go ahead and torque down our lug nuts to 80 foot-pounds. Now you want to go ahead and bring the vehicle down and get an alignment performed.